There is a worldview emerging among political figures, and this worldview goes far beyond imploding the policies of the United States. This is about rewriting how the authoritarians and billionaires value human life. And if we're going to understand what's happening right now, we have to be honest about this from the very beginning, because this goes far beyond Donald Trump's bullying tactics of the Pope that led to him defunding Catholic charities, or his instinct to punish people that he doesn't like. What we are witnessing is not impulsive, this is not chaotic, and it's certainly not accidental. This is a through line, and it's diabolical, and it's insidious. The withdrawal of funds from Catholic charities is a symptom. These are funds that are serving immigrant children. It's much larger, and it's a coordinated shift that began earlier in 25 when figures like Michael Flynn and Elon Musk started publicly attacking Christian organizations that receive government funding to care for people in humanitarian crisis. And if you're following me on Substack, you would have seen that I wrote about it back in March of 2025. And at that time, it may have sounded more like political theater. There were accusations of corruption and claims of money laundering, and as Doge liked to say, waste, fraud, and abuse. This led to dismissals of agencies like USAID as wasteful or even being evil. But when you slow down and follow what actually happened next, a very different picture begins to come into focus. Those words from Flynn and Musk were followed by action, and we know that the funding was paused, the contracts were frozen, the organizations that had spent decades doing refugee settlement, medical outreach, and food distribution suddenly received orders to stop. There was no more money. There was no transitional plan. It was all immediate. Refugees were arriving at airports with no certainty that anyone would be paid to house them, and medical supplies set in warehouses because the people responsible for delivering them were told to stand down. And for the record, to date, the Trump administration has not complied with the judge's order to fully restore USAID funding. But here's where I want you to pause with me for a moment, because this is one of those spaces in the story where something deeper reveals itself. And on the surface, this will seem perplexing, but when you dig deeper, it'll make sense. These organizations working on humanitarian efforts are not fringe groups. The ones that fed the hungry and cared for the vulnerable. And they were targeted anyway, which raises a question that most people might miss. Why would Michael Flynn, who identifies as Catholic, why would he accuse Catholic charities as being fraudulent and support the defunding of Catholic-aligned humanitarian work? Why would J.D. Vance, who is also Catholic and also criticized the humanitarian work of the Catholic Church, dismiss the authority of the Pope when he speaks on moral issues like war and human life? At first, that may feel like a contradiction. But it isn't. What we are seeing is a separation taking place in real time. This is the next phase of revealing the faces who are actually behind Project 2025 and the defunding of humanitarian efforts, and who is mandating how human life will be devalued. This is a distorted and insidious form of belief that still uses the language of religion, still claims its identity, but no longer submits to its moral authority when that authority challenges the power. When the Pope speaks out against war, he is told to stay in his lane. When aid organizations serve refugees, they are accused and then defunded. And when humanitarian systems operate outside of ideological control, they are dismantled. So the question is no longer, are these people religious? The question becomes, what kind of religion is this? Because it is not functioning as a system of care. It is functioning as a system of control. This is where the pattern becomes unmistakable. When aid is neutral, regulated, and accountable through audited financials and reports, it is still labeled corrupt by Musk, Doge, and people like Flynn and J.D. Vance. When it is dismantled, there is no immediate replacement. There's just a gap. And in that gap, people suffer. The very organizations capable of doing that work are the ones being stripped of their funding and credibility unless they align with a specific ideological framework. So we need to pause again, because now we are no longer talking about efficiency or budget priorities. We are talking about who is allowed to help and under what conditions. And underneath that, who is considered worth helping at all. This is where the deeper layer comes into view, and it's the one that can feel the most unsettling if you've come out of high control Christianity. Because if you're like me, you were taught to trust authority, to believe that those in power, especially those who spoke in the name of God, were guided by something sacred. But what you are witnessing now is authority being redefined in real time. And it is certainly not based on compassion or service. It is based on alignment with power. There's something intentional about all of this, from defunding humanitarian efforts to attacking the Pope, to going even deeper into defunding that targets the literal institution of the Catholic Church. This is all strategic, and it's structural, and it's intentional. It's all part of the playbook to impact who both Christians and Catholics should be loyal to. And hint, it ain't the Pope and it ain't Jesus. And this is why this response of defunding Catholic charities is so important. The religious leader of millions says that war is wrong, that human life must be protected, and he is dismissed, corrected, told to stay in his lane, and then their humanitarian work is attacked. This reveals something we simply cannot ignore. Religious authority is only being honored when it supports the agenda, and when it doesn't, it is sidelined. This is the reordering of power that Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Russell Vought, and Stephen Miller have dreamed about. Now listen to this. They knew the quickest way to do it would be through the most gullible. And that is people already indoctrinated to believe that God can bless the actions of the corrupt if you wrap it in Bible verses and pretend Jesus is pleased with all of it. So when you look back at where this all started, the attacks on humanitarian organizations, the defunding of aid, the disruption of systems that kept people alive, and you follow it to where we are now, with religious leaders being publicly undermined for speaking out against violence and war, that through line becomes clear. This was never about policy. It was never all about Trump. In fact, I believe that Trump is so ignorant to the entire playbook because they just keep padding his pockets or just capitalizing on his idiocy, because only Trump would be proud of defunding a church's organizations program that helps migrant children. But I want to wrap this up by saying this. If you're someone who has been deconstructing from Christianity, specifically from the version of Christianity that taught you to trust authority without question, to believe that good leadership would naturally produce good outcomes, this moment right now can feel especially disorienting. What you were taught doesn't match what we're seeing. Many of us were told that when the right people were in power, people who claimed Christianity, who spoke the language of faith, who promised to defend religious values, that the result would be protection of life, of families, of the vulnerable, of the very ministries and organizations that embodied the teachings you and I may have been raised on. But what is unfolding right now is forcing a much harder truth to the surface. The same administration that many churches supported is now creating conditions where those very churches, those very ministries, those very humanitarian arms of Christianity are being cut off or sidelined or forced into impossible positions. That realization lands differently when you've come out of a system that taught you loyalty would be reciprocated. So, because this is a moment where something deeper is being revealed. This is not just a political disagreement between conservatives and progressives. This is a complete fracture inside Christianity itself that extends well beyond Protestantism and into unrecognizable Christian theologies of Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. This is a palpable dividing line and a day of reckoning for both Catholics and Christians. This line is the line being drawn between those who still believe their faith calls them to care for others and those who are aligning with a version of power that sees that care as expendable. Because now the question is not, what do I believe? It becomes, what did I participate in? What did I trust, and what is that trust being used to justify now? This moment can feel like the ground literally shifting beneath you because it exposes something many were never allowed to question. That is this, that faith, when tied too closely to power, can be used to justify harm just as easily as it can be used to heal it. So if you're feeling that tension, if part of you is recognizing the patterns and a part of you is realizing that something about this feels deeply wrong, you are not confused. You are seeing clearly, and your deconstructing journey is serving you well. You are watching the distance grow between a faith that once called you to care for people and a system that is now deciding which people are worth caring for at all. None of this is about God, Jesus, faith, salvation at all. It's about a system being put in place that protects power. And those who are deconstructing and see how dangerous this is, and those who are holding steadfast to that faith to push back on Trump, Thiel, Musk, Vaught, and Miller, we're now all a threat to those in power, because what Trump and the others are saying now is this: there is only one God, and he is in the White House. Many of us said years ago that no one will be safe, including the ones who believe God put him in this position of power, including the ones who voted for him. I think now many of you are seeing it. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. So stay awake. If you want to go deeper to understand the side of Catholicism of Michael Flynn and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, you need to read this article. And if you want to understand the side of Christianity that birthed this radicalized evangelical movement, you need to read this article. Now, if you're deconstructing from Christianity and want to support my work, be sure to follow me on all my platforms.